Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts, I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello, Zach.
Hey, Tim, welcome back, buddy.
Welcome back. Here we are.
Let's do it, man. We're
Once
talking,
again.
what, UFOs, ghosts? What could it possibly
What's
be?
the difference?
Oh,
No,
interesting point.
I don't mean to say that at all. We're talking about UFOs, we're talking about sightings, we're talking about weird stuff, but man, we are talking about one of the oddest type of UFO sightings I've come across.
Okay. I didn't realize there was like a spectrum.
Well,
Aren't they all kind of weird?
I mean, in my mind, there is.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we are talking about UFO sightings that happen at schools, schoolyards.
Like elementary schools, middle schools, high schools?
Yes.
Okay.
All of the above.
Okay, got it.
And the research, everything from this, nearly everything from this episode is taken from Schoolyard UFO Encounters by Preston Dennett. Check it out if you think this is an interesting topic because it is fascinating. Now, this book covers over 100 accounts, so different UFO sightings at schools.
It's actually surprising to me to hear that there are that many, like over 100 at schools.
I know, because when you think about it, the most common UFO encounters, we're talking about just like close encounters of the first kind, just sightings and maybe the second kind, that sort of thing.
Okay.
They happen, generally speaking, more often than not at night. People see a light moving at a high altitude. It's very short or brief. Landings are very rare.
That's an interesting point.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, the average UFO sighting has about 5 witnesses.
Okay.
I would say, more often than not, less. So not many people, but there are a significant amount of well-documented schoolyard UFO encounters. And these, it's like the exact opposite. They happen during the daytime. Landings in humanoid, when I say humanoid, I'm talking about like extraterrestrial humanoid looking creatures or beings, not that infrequent. And it happens for an extended period of time. And it's almost as if the UFOs themselves or the occupants within the UFOs want to be seen. It's not like they're just zipping across the sky.
Yeah.
They hover and they linger, and it's odd.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of any? I mean, can you think of any off the top of your head?
So I've heard of a few that took place, I think, in the UK.
Okay,
And I cannot remember the names to save my life. But
we'll probably talk about that one.
Okay, Schoolyard Encounters.
Yeah.
Like, north of like 30 kids, all kind of like, whoa, what? I mean, that's
right.
Like mass sightings.
Mass sightings. That's exactly right. And the other thing that this book does a great job of, these are not just UK or not just US encounters or sightings. We're talking about the United States, Australia, England, France, Spain, Belgium, Canada, New Zealand, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Indonesia, China, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico. There's even more. These are every continent. And they all are around these schools and these children. And it's just like, what is going on? And you start to look at this and you're like, why? Like, what's going on? And to me, my mind, believe it or not, actually first goes to like, are these kids even telling the truth?
Right. Flights of fancy, something like that. Imagination.
It's like you and I, we both have kids, and kids have great imaginations, right?
Trying to make sense of the world around them.
They're
right.
imaginative. I mean, kids have imaginary friends, all these sorts of things. It's like, do they know what's real, what's not real?
Sure.
Can they describe what's happening? And not always, but quite often there are teachers or parents or even police officers or other people around that can corroborate these sightings and say, yeah,
got it.
Those 30 kids, they saw exactly what I saw.
Well, this is really super interesting because it's like what I think gets to the root of the counter argument for kids seeing UFOs is they're not reliable witnesses.
Right.
Kids see monsters in the closet, under the bed. Oh no, daddy, you look out the window, you see a scary lamp, right? Yeah. It's like, so therefore the idea of having, who cares? If it's 50 witnesses, who cares? I hate to say it, but it's like if they're 5 years old and they can't make sense of the world around them, then yeah, it's going to be to them an alien, whereas it could just be totally something like absolutely innocuous, right? So that's a very interesting point. But then to have it corroborated by adults, not
adults, always, but sometimes.
Sometimes,
yes,
sure.
Yes.
And not like adults are the gold standard, but I mean, at least it's like, okay, it's another piece of evidence,
exactly.
Right? So it's huge.
So if you take these accounts at their face value, the real question is why kids and why schools?
Right.
Because as I laid out, more than 100 accounts in this book going back over 100 years, every continent in this book, at least outside of Antarctica, of course, but every continent, all different age groups, like why schools? Why kids? I mean, do you just, without going into the details, I mean, do you have any theories or thoughts?
Two immediate thoughts. One is, so as we talk about like UFO sightings and abductions, what we hear about are, these aliens or creatures or whatever, right? Like looking at and getting into the anatomy of adults and like how people's bodies work and that kind of a thing, I think is the assumption. So perhaps,
sure.
A kid, like a school is like, well, here's a sample size of a 5-year-old, 7, 9, whatever, right? That's kind of like one thought. The other thought is perhaps it's like I'm trying to like channel what an alien right now. Maybe they're trying to figure out also where you have like these mass population areas, like how do people interact and work together and that kind of a thing.
I like where your head's at, like a research standpoint.
Yeah, observational.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, some theories, and again, this is just entirely speculation. I mean, I don't know. You don't know. I assume most people listening have no idea either. But I mean, some people that study this stuff closely postulate that perhaps they're just less subject to the dogmatic, preconceived notions that adults are. It's like an adult could see a sighting and just completely rationalize it away. Like, oh, well, that wasn't extraterrestrial or whatever. I'm sure there's some logical explanation for that. Whereas a kid is just going to take in the sensory information and process it completely as it is without the same filter that an adult might have. So maybe there's some sort of a rationale or motive behind that. I don't know, speculation. Another idea is that when these crafts and even the occupants within it, and we'll get into that in the latter half of the episode, start interacting with the kids, perhaps they are trying to just influence later generations.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Like they can influence the population when they're young, get a message across to them so that when they grow older and they are, functioning members of society and raising families of their own, etc., they might be able to just kind of nudge humanity in a certain direction.
Sure. Yeah. Or 30 years from now, that generation of kids will be older or whatever. And they're all of a sudden UFOs aren't so weird anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other idea that people talk about is that maybe kids are just seen as less threatening.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
Because it's like so many of these sightings that at least are being released by the government now involve like military ships and planes and stuff. It's like, armed with nuclear weapons and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And it's like, well, here's some kids. It's like, they're not going to attack us. They're not going to do anything. Maybe we can observe humanity in a much more relatively safe manner. With these schoolyards.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like, just from an observational kind of learning standpoint, they could be wondering, like, why are these kids all going to one place?
Right. What's going on?
Yeah. What are they doing every day?
Where do the parents go? What? Why? Huh? How? Okay. So let's get into some of the sightings here. So we're going to first start with sightings, and we're going to go into the actual beings that are in the crafts and their interactions in the second half, as I said. So here's just kind of a couple real odd ones to just kind of wet your whistle, if you will. Okay, so Sacred Heart Elementary in Moline, Illinois. This happened March 9th, 1967 at 1:30 p.m. So this policeman was out doing his daily traffic duty around the school, just, making sure people don't blow through stop signs and speed near the school. He saw a 30 to 40 foot long, bright metallic football-shaped craft. He said it was about 3,000 to 4,000 feet in the air and about 1.5 miles away. This was witnessed, what he saw was witnessed by roughly 40 school kids and 2 nuns, because this was I assume a Catholic school, and also several cars pulled off on the side of the road and watched this thing just kind of float there.
Sure.
He had an 8mm camera with him as part of his, just police officer duties. He took it out and he filmed it. I could not find that video. If it's out there, I would love to see it if you know where it is. But he said it was moving slowly, quietly, and against the wind. So it wasn't a blimp that was floating, or something like that in the breeze. A couple days later, the Air Force showed up to investigate, and at the police station where he worked, 3 mysterious men in black suits interrogated him for several hours. I mean, this one just kind of has it all.
Yeah, there
right?
you go. It's everything. Yeah.
But I mean, the reason I kind of took this out, obviously, because of the men in black thing, which is wild. But also, who's a more credible witness on the stand than a police officer?
Right.
With a camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, what on earth is that?
In the eyes of the law.
Sure, right. Okay, so don't have to talk about that too much. Next one here. This happened at the Richmond School in Marinawi, New Zealand. Sorry if I mispronounce that. Actually, I'm sure I mispronounce it. I'm sorry. May 17th, 1970 at 2 p.m. It was a warm, sunny day. School was happening outside. 400 students and several teachers see an enormous floating disc. They said it was the size of a basketball if you held it at arm's length.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No, yeah. So
it looked like to be the same size as a basketball.
If you held the basketball at arm's length.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
10 minutes later, it turned into a round ball. It moved northeast, and it flattened out again and shot off at a very high speed.
Oh, so it like shape shifted.
Yeah. So it was a disc,
travel?
then it turned into a ball, and then it like flattened into a disc again, and then just shot off at a, quote, very high speed. So 400 witnesses at a school.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Right.
All right. Not even scratching the surface yet.
Totally.
So next, this one is just wild. Foxcroft boarding school in Middleburg, Virginia. This happened October 1970. This is a girls' school, and 50 girls were in a tree-lined meadow just outside the boarding school. They were talking, they were doing homework, they're just kind of hanging out outside, nice warm October afternoon. And all of a sudden, this object slowed to a near standstill, and it floated just above their heads, and it went from one end of the meadow to the other end of the meadow. And it just slowly floated, I would say, maybe 10, 12 feet in the air. I'm just guessing here, right?
Yeah.
And a third of the way across, the bottom opened up and a strong, bright light shined out of it. And all of a sudden, these kids, these 50 girls, they just start shouting, "A UFO, a UFO." And the witnesses on the record, they just describe this overwhelming sense of euphoria,
really,
kindness, just loving, peaceful, just within them. And they just started shouting, "UFO, UFO, take us with you." And they're just running along with this.
No.
It gets to the other end of the meadow, and it took off as just so fast that it seemed to almost disappear.
Wild. Take us with you?
Yeah. And then it's gone, and they're all just like, what did we just see? And as happens with many UFO encounters, it seemed to just change many of their just beliefs in life. I don't want to say beliefs, but just their outlook.
Okay.
Like they're just like, more loving, more outgoing, more peaceful, more in tune with nature, all that sort of stuff, which sounds very new agey, hippy dippy, but
that's a big deal.
It is a common theme that comes across with these sightings.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have, what did I say? The first one was 40 witnesses. Second one was 400. This one was 50 witnesses. You can't just discredit that. You can't discount that.
Right.
It is wild.
Okay.
So those are just kind of to wet your whistle. These next two sightings I pulled out because they're not common, but they share a theme, as you'll see, and I just think they're so fascinating. And I love your take as to what this could possibly be. Okay, so this first one took place at Jerome Elementary School. This was October 22nd, 1954, and it was in Maryville, Ohio. Students outside because they got extra recess for the day. Who doesn't love that?
That's right.
Teachers love it. Students love it. Everyone loves it. They're outside. It's a nice warm fall day. 3:15 p.m. A cigar-shaped object is seen hovering over the school. It's very bright. Eventually, all the kids see it. First, a couple. They start shouting. Everyone turns and looks at it. The kids are not scared. And that's also a very common theme that happens. They're not scared. They think it's fun. They think it's funny. They're running around. They're looking at it. They're pointing at it. They're like, what's going on? Principal comes outside. He sees it. He confirms its existence after the fact, during the fact. And the principal calls other teachers to come out. And he's like, what is this thing? And before the other teachers get out, it flies away incredibly fast. So another common theme with this is just this, very, very fast nature of it disappearing almost. But here's where it gets weird. If that's not weird enough.
I was going to say.
Right? Yeah. A cigar-shaped UFO hovering over school is not weird. This part's weird. As it flew away, it emitted a trail of white spiderweb-like substances.
That's creepy.
And it was all around them. This just wispy white thin substance was covering the whole school, the entire school grounds, just covered with this stuff. The sky was full of these soft white tufts. They said it fell like cotton slowly to the ground, long white fibers. Some described it as, quote, angel hair. It fell for 45 minutes.
No way. So it's just like falling from the sky?
Yes.
Like raining, basically? Okay.
Right.
I've never heard of that before.
The principal said, quote, it looked like asbestos, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Long strands, they couldn't be broken. It was too strong to just like rip. It didn't stick. It wasn't exactly sticky, right? But when you touched one of them, just a single strand, it would roll up into a ball and then it would disintegrate and dissolve.
This is so frustrating.
What? Like, what is this?
Because, it's like, I would love to... Let's get our hands on it. Let's study it. Let's figure out what this stuff is, right? Or at least try.
Why?
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
How?
Yeah. That is wild, dude.
Okay.
That is nuts.
People were, these kids were running around. They were picking it up. I'm sure the teachers, the principal was, handling this stuff. People who touched it, their hands turned green. They sweated. Their hands sweated. The hands got clammy. And then their whole body started sweating, but they were better generally like within an hour. It was like this chemical reaction was occurring on their skin.
Right. That's so bizarre, dude.
So these teachers, they scooped it all up, or as much as they could, put it in bags. They sent it to the Lockbourne Air Force Base, which was a nearby Air Force base. No response. Right? No surprise.
Right.
A researcher showed up the next day. And teachers, principals, students, they all separately verified and confirmed in their own words. So, first the principal went in with the researcher. He described what it was. Teachers described what it was. They would call in like a dozen or 24 kids separately, independently. Tell me in your own words, what happened? What did you see? What did you touch? What did it look like? Everyone corroborated the story.
Interesting.
Thoughts?
I have no idea. I
know. It's like, is that exhaust? Is it like some sort of like...
space-time fabric?
You're right. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Okay. So let's talk about this next one. It kind of dovetails with this. This is at Whitsett Elementary School, October 27th, 1955. So 1 year and 5 days later. I don't know if that is important or not, but it is interesting. This is in North Carolina, and this happened at 2:45 in the p.m. So these kids were outside, recess, or I don't know what they were. Let's call
playing
it recess.
outside. Sure.
They're playing outside, and they see 8 spherical metallic objects just flying and zipping around the school. So they ran, like a group of them run inside to get the principal. Now it's worth mentioning, this principal, this is 1955, of course. This principal flew 46 combat missions in World War II. He was a trained aerial observer. So he comes out, he verifies, I see those two. I have no idea what those are. Those are not airplanes. Those are not helicopters. I don't know what they are. There's something weird. And at this point, there are 120 students outside, and they start to get kind of scared.
Yeah.
But also excited because it's weird, and this is not the normal part of the school day. And again, the principal, clearly, no idea what's going on. He runs back inside. He grabs his binoculars. So he's, trying to focus on these things. They're zipping around kind of fast, doing these aerial maneuvers strictly above the school building. Okay? Still can't make any sense of it.
Just flying formations up there?
Kind of, okay. From what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And then at once, these crafts began to emit 2 to 3 inch long white wispy threads.
Again.
Well,
similar,
right.
Similarly, yeah.
And he said they looked like Christmas decorations, which I would think like tinsel is kind of what he's describing.
Sure.
Except they're white and they're very thin. And he said they looked like cotton candy. And it absolutely, once again, covered the entire school and the surrounding area. I love this. One kid, and you can picture the kid, he tastes it. He picks it up, he puts it in his mouth. And before, the principal and the teachers are like, oh my God, get that out of your mouth. He said, he does
it's like cotton candy.
No, he says it tastes kind of salty.
Yeah, sure.
But, just kind of dissolves on his mouth. It didn't burn anyone. It didn't, it doesn't cause that sweating thing that the other one did that they described. But they take it inside later. They try to do tests on it and stuff like this. They burned it. It was a yellow flame and it had a fibrous odor.
Fibrous?
Fibrous, like if you're burning cotton or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Or wool, perhaps.
Yeah, cloth. Okay.
Yeah, other than that, they couldn't really make any heads or tails of it. They sent a sample to the Burlington Laboratory for chemical analysis, and they came back and they said that it was not cotton, it was not cellulose, it was no known commercial synthetic material.
Sure.
We don't know what it is. We're just as confused as you are. They said that the closest thing it resembled from what they could tell were spider webs. So,
again,
they sent it to a biologist who studied spiders. And they're like, hey, Spider-Man. Hey, spider guy, what do you think this is? And so this guy does a test on it. He probably looks at it through a microscope. And his take was that it was too even, too uniform to be from a spider.
Sure.
And he said that given the amount, the volume of these white wispy threads, he's like, there would have to be spiders in this if it were from spiders. And there were no spiders. So it's even if you discount the fact that they saw the 8 metallic discs floating around and they disappeared and then it fell from the sky, it's let's just I don't know, maybe spiders, but there's no spiders.
Did you see spiders? Did you see
no spiders?
5 to 20,000 spiders?
Right.
Yeah.
The Air Force, they investigated the situation. They said that the flying balls or discs were reflections from the sun on higher altitude things. And one interesting thing from this was the principal. He took a sample, he wrapped it up in a little bag or something. He put it in his wallet. He didn't tell a single person about it. And then a couple days later, he went to check on it. It was gone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The wallet was gone or the thread was
just
gone?
The sample that he had in his wallet that he didn't tell anyone was gone.
Okay.
So read into that whatever you'd like. It's just what on earth? So I don't know. Any sort of guess what these white wispy things emitted from UFOs over schoolyards could be?
I mean, chemtrails, basically. That's what it's got to be.
I don't know.
I don't know. What else could it be?
They got to dump the payload before they jump back into hyperspace or something.
I can't even imagine. It doesn't make any sense. I have no idea.
It's weird because it happened twice within a year.
Yeah.
Both over schools. I've never heard of this before. It's not a common occurrence when you hear about UFOs.
Well, that's what I was going to say, which is this isn't every single UFO sighting. This happened 2-3 times, at least as far as we know.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah. Maybe there's other encounters of this sort of thing, but I mean, I've never come across this. Not that I'm a UFO expert, but it's I've read probably more than I care to admit about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Never come across this before.
Okay.
let's shift gears slightly. Obviously, we're still sticking with UFOs. We're still sticking with schools. But let's talk about landings and humanoids.
Creepy.
Yes.
Very
so not
creepy.
just things in the sky. We're talking about like Close Encounters of the second and possibly third kind. Okay. First one. We're going to talk about a couple real brief ones here, and then we're going to talk about some of the more famous ones that if you've at all looked into this, you probably heard about. And it's all weird and it's all crazy. So first, we're talking Evansville High School. This is in Evansville, Indiana. This is August 25th, 1955. Several teens saw, quote, little green men at a high school athletic field. They said they were 4 feet tall. They glowed green and they were running around the schoolyard. And as they got closer, the things, the beings, the creatures stopped and stared at them. And there was this period of like a standoff. And then they turned around and they, quote, loped into the darkness. Like big gangly steps or hopping or something.
Into the darkness of?
This was, I guess I didn't say this was, at night. They were,
They just kind of like wandered off, basically. Loped off. I guess.
Loped. They loped off. 4 days later, 82 miles away in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, the Sutton family saw a UFO crash on their family farm.
Jeez.
And this one, if you're not familiar with the Hopkinsville, Kentucky, we should maybe talk about this in more detail, except this was where a UFO crash happened near the family farm. They saw the thing shoot across the sky, land a couple hundred yards from their house, and then their house was apparently besieged by these small 4 foot tall green glowing creatures, and they just fired shotguns and the 22 at them.
Strange.
That was 4 days later, 82 miles away. Same description of these things.
That's nuts.
But the first one happened at a school. So, I don't know. Coincidence or not, I don't know. Anyway, so next, this one happened at Point Pleasant School in Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Mothman prophecies,
anyone? There you go. Thanks for
Okay.
paying attention. 1966. And if you want to know more about Mothman, check out our Patreon page. That's on Patreon, right? I think
Mothman?
It is. Yeah,
I think it is.
Yeah, check that out because it is wild. And if you only know the Richard Gere movie, there's so much more, and it's so weird, and it's well documented by John Keel in his book. But 1966, Point Pleasant, a mom saw a UFO hover over a school, and this was when she was going to pick up her kids. And outside of the UFO, there was a man standing outside the UFO hovering in the air. There's a man standing, and he had a pointed face, long silver hair, which other people in the area described this same person, being, creature, and this being interacted with a couple of people, and if it's in fact the same one, and he introduced himself as Indrid Cold. So maybe Indrid Cold was also hovering over schools.
Interesting.
Who knows?
Yeah. I was going to ask if it was Indrid Cold. So
I would say probably, unless there's more of these creatures.
They're all with this. They all have the same name. They're all.
I'm Indrid Cold. Hello, I'm also Indrid Cold. Okay, let's talk about some of the big ones. That's just gotta wet your whistle just a little bit. All right, so this first one happened in Melbourne, Australia.
Very good. Harry Potter.
No. So Westall High School, 11 a.m., Melbourne, Australia. April 6th, 1966. This is one of, if not the most famous UFO sightings down under in Australia. It's possibly one of the most famous UFO sightings, period. And it takes place at a school. If you've never heard of it, look it up or pay close attention to the next 15 minutes here. It is the largest mass UFO sighting in Australia history. More than 300 people witnessed this.
Okay.
Kids, they're all outside. They're running around. It's gym class. Someone says, "Look up. There's a flying saucer." Of course, everyone looks up. It's a round silver disc, and it's hovering low over the school. I mean, let's just pause for a minute. We keep talking about this. how do you even react?
I have no idea what I do.
If you see just a large metallic disc hovering anywhere, let alone over a school.
It'd be so freaky.
Like,
I mean, I'd be scared. Honestly, I'd just be scared.
Kinda, yeah.
I mean, I know everybody, well, not everybody, but most accounts say I felt a tremendous sense of peace. I wasn't concerned or whatever the case. I would be freaked out.
I would be, I don't even know. I'd be beside myself. But anyway, round silver disc hovering low over the school. Their kids, they start running around. They're screaming. They're not feeling the sense of euphoria and peace necessarily. Some of them run inside and they start yelling. And as they're doing this, like, oh, there's a UFO hovering over the school, or flying saucer, I think they were calling it. Bell rings, like to change classes, you know?
Yeah.
And nearly the whole school, like, empties outside because, you know, why not?
Sure.
Kids are running through the hall saying there's a UFO. I would run outside. So this happens. Some kids are scared, terrified even. Others are just completely transfixed, like they're in a hypnotic state, just staring at this thing. The disc slowly starts moving away, and some people start following it. It more or less just kind of goes over this tree line beyond the property of the school and sets down. A couple kids, they run after this and they passed out. They just like, and I don't know, based on the notes in this book, if they just blacked out and forgot what happened, if they, you know, were overcome with just all sorts of traumatic, you know, weird emotions, and they passed out. So anyway, so they passed out. The ambulance came. One student was so traumatized by the event, they never returned to school. And eventually this thing floated up from beyond the school line and it turned on its side, and they said it disappeared. Now, did it actually disappear? Did it shoot off so fast that no one could actually, like, keep eyes on it? Who knows?
Or go through a wormhole or something, right?
Right.
But that's consistent with what Bob Lazar said.
Oh, what?
And how it traveled, flipped onto its side, right?
Yeah.
Or he was saying it was like belly up, or, you know, like,
yeah.
But very similar to how that was described.
That's a good point. I had forgotten about that. So as far as the description of this craft goes, most people said it was as long as a Cessna airplane, or one person said 1.5 times the size of a sedan. It seems, yeah. Anyway, so I mean, you get a general size, general sense. So maybe 15 feet, maybe 20-ish, I guess. What's that in meters? I don't know.
I was going to say 1.5 Toyota Camrys. Okay.
Round, silver, lights all around the bottom.
Yep.
No windows, and it gave off a little bit of heat, and it made a low buzzing sound.
Okay.
It would hover near the school. It would accelerate away, and then it would just slowly come back. And then it would hover, and then it would just kind of shoot off, and then it would just kind of come back, and it would just kind of keep doing this. At one point, 5 Cessna aircraft came just from somewhere, circled around the object for about 15 minutes, observing it, keeping eyes on it, and then they flew away. But it, according to some of the witnesses, it appeared that the planes and the craft were playing this kind of like cat and mouse game.
Interesting. Interacting, right?
Right. So later, as they were doing this investigation, this is very famous. If you don't live in Australia and you've never heard of this, like this is, I mean, it's different than Roswell in that there's no crash. It's different than like Area 51 because there's not a base, but it is that level of famous in Australia, at least. So they're doing the investigation and they start looking for the pilots, because it's like, okay, you got Cessna aircraft, right? So there's got to be like the airplanes, there's got to be pilots, there's got to be flight logs. There's, they only have a limited radius of which they can fly from nearby airports. You want to take a guess?
I don't like where this is going at all.
No flight records at any airports nearby. No planes unaccounted for. These aren't military craft, so it's not like you can just say, well, it's
an F-18 or whatever.
Yeah, it's the Air Force. Of course, they're covering this up. It's like, no, there's just no account for this. Yeah. But like, what did I say? 300? Yeah, 300 people saw these.
Makes no sense.
Nothing.
Yeah.
What? I don't know. Okay.
Makes no sense.
One witness, this was a nearby neighbor. So neighbor of the school, obviously not on school property, saw it, confirmed the whole thing, top to bottom, hovering over the school, the airplanes, the going over the tree line, the landing, the taking off again. A second neighbor saw it too. They walked close to where it landed, and they said that when they got close to it, it looked like it came out of a mold, meaning like there were no joints or rivets or like windows or hatches.
Yes.
It was just completely solid.
Yeah.
Like
a uniform thing.
Yeah. Like we don't know how this was made. Like this isn't some sort of top secret Air Force, whatever. Like this thing was just from a different planet. I mean, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, it's extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Period. Huh.
So 30 minutes after it all ended, the military showed up. They talked to the principal. The principal called a special assembly. All right, everybody, get inside.
Pep rally?
Yeah. He tells the students, no one's going to talk about this.
No kidding.
This never happened. You haven't seen anything. It was only a weather balloon. If you talk about this, you are going to get in trouble.
Oh, my gosh.
Right?
That is so bad.
Well, we know that that didn't happen.
Right.
Obviously, because we're talking about it how many years later.
That is so bad.
Media promptly found out about this and started interviewing the kids. The kids were telling their version of events and so on and so forth. Military went into the location where it landed. They roped it all off. They blockaded it so no one could see it. They burned the ground so that there was no trace of anything.
So
where the weather balloon landed, right?
It's so stupid. Just
right.
Why? And I'm sorry, do you remember what year this was?
Yeah, this was 66.
66. Okay.
Yeah.
So given that this happened in 66, it makes a little bit more sense that they told the kids, you didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go cover up every single possible piece of evidence out there. Right. I feel like if it happened now, there might be a little bit more investigation around it, or like perhaps it's like,
yeah, I mean, I think we've the UFO conversation has evolved to the place where I would hope at least you can't just tell 300 people like you didn't see anything. Yes. And also we're going to go burn the ground where the thing you didn't see landed.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
I get it though.
I guess, time and the place and so on. And
exactly.
I mean, who knows? Maybe it was, maybe they thought it was some sort of Russian, Chinese, communist, spy craft that landed on a school. I mean, who knows? But okay, here's where it gets interesting. I mean, because none of that's interesting.
Well, I was going to say everything here is interesting. So
Derek Weiss, 5 years and 11 months old. So almost 6. Let's call him a 6-year-old. He was the only person that, at least as far as I could tell, saw any beings associated with this craft. So up until this point, this is all just like another quote unquote regular sighting.
Got
right?
it. With this sighting specifically, with this schoolyard.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So he's the only one here. 6 years old. He was playing on a swing set at his house near the school. He sees. So the thing you need to take into account, obviously, is that we're dealing with a 6-year-old. 6-year-olds have, imaginations and so on and so forth. So we're going to, at least for the sake of this, take him at his word, or at least let's keep that in mind as we talk through this. So he says he saw 3 saucers circle the school.
Okay.
He says that he saw one land in the trees. He climbed a fence to go see it. He said when he saw it on the ground, it was landed in the grass, and within seconds, a door opened and 3 beings came out and they hovered towards him. They didn't walk toward, they didn't lope towards him. Okay.
Sure.
They just like hovered toward him. They were according to him, about 3 feet tall. They had spindly, thin legs and arms. They had 4 fingers on each hand. They had gray-brown skin and big black eyes. So you know.
Classic.
It's the classic gray alien.
Yes.
And oddly enough, I don't know how much we've gone into detail. Like, generally speaking, when you see these beings, they come in threes. So it's interesting that he also says there were three. Oh yeah.
I feel like I missed that somewhere.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's just something I picked up as I, read this sort of thing, but generally speaking, they come in threes. So we'll just leave it at that. So he sees three of them. Classic gray alien thing. He also said that they had tight-fitting black suits with a triangle insignia kind of on their chest.
That's so cliche.
It's weird.
I'm not discounting what he's saying.
Yeah.
But it would just crack me up if the aliens were that obvious. Like it's so on the nose.
Right? It's a little Star Trek insignia.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. I don't know. So they said to him, and another odd thing here is that he's describing them talking to him, but it's telepathy. But it's a 6-year-old who doesn't understand telepathy or know the word for that. So he's like, they were talking to me, but I couldn't hear them, but I knew what they were saying. So it's like, okay. To me, it's like you immediately get a sense of credibility, at least to me. So he said that they relayed to him, we're not going to harm you, but you have to come down now, meaning you have to come to us. And he refused to. He's like, I don't want to. I don't want to come
danger.
with you. Right.
Yeah.
And one of them touched their triangle on their chest.
Okay.
And they all just like turned on a 180 and like hovered back into the craft. The door closed. It flew away. He said the grass was yellow-brown where it landed, and it was swirled in a clockwise fashion. And 2 weeks later, he said that he was abducted, and it began a lifelong pattern of abductions.
Sure.
So that is the world famous sighting in Australia. Weird.
Very weird.
I mean, do you believe him?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree. I mean, who knows? The clockwise. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of detail for one person, let alone a 6-year-old to take in. But I mean,
well, and I want to be very clear about something too, which is like, yeah, I believe that he felt like he saw this. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he straight up 100% saw aliens.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, yeah, I actually believe these people, what they said, what they saw. I don't think they're lying. I don't know what they saw. I'm not saying they even saw aliens. They could have all hallucinated. I'm just saying I believe that they said
mass
these
hallucination.
Things.
They're not 300 people are not making up a lie consciously. Yeah.
So we've taken a little bit of flack for saying, okay, we believe eyewitness accounts 100%.
Well, yeah.
So I'm just drawing the distinction that I believe that they believe that they saw this. I'm not saying I believe them 100% and everything they said is factually 1,000% correct. I'm just saying, I believe that they thought they saw something. Okay.
I'm right
Next
there
topic.
with you.
Yeah, there you go.
It's weird. So, okay, let's talk about one. This happened at Broadhaven Elementary School in West Wales. This was February 4th, 1977. 15 students outside playing. They see a shiny, silvery object low overhead and landing. 10-year-old described this. He said it was silver gray, 40-foot long, cigar-shaped. It had an upper dome that covered the middle third of this craft.
Okay.
And there were red pulsing lights underneath that only lasted a few seconds. An 11-year-old witness said it was a silver cigar-shaped craft, dome on top, red flashing lights. 9-year-old. And again, I mean, when this happens, it's so fascinating. The police accounts, the principals are all like right on top of this. Mm-hmm. They separate the kids. They bring them in one at a time and they say, describe what you saw. So that it's not like a room full of 15 kids being like, tell me what you saw. Well, I saw a cigar. Yeah. I saw a cigar too. Right. You're getting individual accounts of this. So anyway, not to belabor the point. So yes, the 9-year-old said large silver, humming sound, saw an occupant in a silver suit with long ears.
That's not common for UFO sightings.
That's weird. It's different. 10-year-old, separate 10-year-old said that they saw it land. He ran inside to get the headmaster. The headmaster refused to come out because he was like, stop pulling my leg. I got administrative work to do or something. And then went back outside and saw, quote, the man, and became very frightened.
The man.
Like the man in the craft or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Saw a figure.
Yes.
Makes more sense. Okay.
Yep. He said that the man wasn't tall. He wore green and he didn't look nice. And he had pointed ears.
Okay.
The kid went home, told his dad. what happened. And his dad was a RAF officer, so the Royal Air Force. He was a squadron leader, and he believed him. It's like, I know my kid. Yeah. I know when my kid's telling stories. I know when my kid's telling the truth, and I believe my kid. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, interesting. 9-year-old saw a silver green object. It landed about 1,000 feet away. Saw a person in a silver suit get out. 7-year-old saw, quote, a monster dressed in blue with an orange head. So another interesting thing, you know, as I kind of go through some of these different witness accounts, is that we've talked about this before. When you have two eyewitnesses that see, let's just say, a crime occur.
Sure.
And if they both describe it absolutely verbatim, a prosecutor, a defense attorney might look at that and be like, I think they corroborate, or they got together, they came up with their story and they're now telling it, because people perceive different things differently, and memory is not perfect. So when people describe the same event, but with just slightly varying details, the casual observer might look at that and be like, oh, see, there, holes. There's holes in the story. But actually, that, to my mind, to your mind, I assume at least, to a lot of people, that actually adds credibility when there's just slight discrepancies to the overall story, which might seem counterintuitive. But anyway, I don't want to belabor it. So the headmaster was convinced that they were all playing a prank on him, and separated them, asked them all questions, asked them to draw pictures of it. And all the pictures were remarkably similar. And at the end of the day, you walked away. It's like, I believe these kids. Like, I don't know what it was they saw.
There you go.
But I believe that they were all telling the truth.
That's what it's all about.
And interestingly enough, there were many UFO sightings nearby on the same day, and all the descriptions were generally similar. Like, people just saw this cigar-shaped thing with red pulsing lights just around the area.
And again, this cigar shape. No, I will say, sorry to kind of change directions quickly, but like the orange and the blue from a person standpoint or creature that's not consistent with anything, but the cigar-shaped piece with the pulsating lights. Now, that's very consistent with other sightings.
It's odd.
It's just very interesting. Okay.
It's very odd. 3 days later, it came back. This time, a teacher and one of the cafeteria staff saw it. Yeah. And this time they said that it landed, a figure stood next to the craft, went back inside, and it flew away.
Ba-boom.
But I mean, this time you got two adults that like...
So now it's real.
So now we can actually believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
What is that?
I'm cool with that.
Cool, man. Kids come home from school. Dad, saw a scary monster with a blue head.
I feel like I've heard like more like bizarre things. So, you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
Nothing would surprise me as a parent now. I guess what I'm trying to say. It's almost like
kind of,
this kind of stuff I'm cool with, actually.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. You saw an alien? Sure.
Awesome. Want to come on the show?
Yeah, exactly.
What's your Tuesday like? You open?
This is like insider trading, I feel like.
Right. Okay, so this is at least the one I heard about before I picked up the book. Maybe you've heard of it too. I don't know. So this one happened at Ariel, Ariel Elementary School in Rua, Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Nothing yet? No? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Oh, okay. September 16th, 1994. Early in the morning. So kids show up to school and teachers are like, yep, we got a meeting. So everyone just play on the playground for first lesson or whatever. And then we'll have you
2 more minutes, kids.
Right. Makes me wonder how this school is run. But anyway, but again, keep in mind, this is Zimbabwe. We haven't talked about any African sightings. This is rural Zimbabwe. This is 1994. So at least in my mind, relatively recently, but might show my age. I don't know. Anyway.
There you go.
13 teachers and the principal were having a meeting inside. 200 students, ages 6 to 12, were outside on the playground. Mother of one of the students was volunteering, operating what they call a snack cart, closer to the school, not on the playground necessarily, but not witnessing where this stuff is, what's happening. All of a sudden, the kids see a huge silver disc appear overhead, and small objects start flying around it. So disc shows up, smaller discs,
That's weird,
I guess. Yeah, just start like orbiting it, flying around it. An 8-year-old was quoted as saying there was a high-pitched sound when it showed up. Like they could just hear, like all of a sudden, like, what is that? And look up and see this thing. It descended slowly, and then it landed on the other side of the school fence. And they all 200 plus students ran over to see this. Now, what is absolutely wild about this, as opposed to some of these other ones, is that, well, first of all, you can go on Google Maps and zoom in with satellite imagery and see the whole playground and see exactly where that fence is and where it all happened, which I find so interesting. But also, and we'll get into this, a researcher showed up a couple days later and recorded these students.
Oh, wow.
Talking about this, getting their eyewitness accounts. And there's audio and there's video of them just describing what happened. And it's credible. It is credible and it is incredible. And just to hear these students talk about it blows my mind. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. When the disc landed, they all ran over. It had portholes and like 3 landing legs. It, like just kind of came out and it's on the ground. 3 short figures emerged. They had large dark eyes, black jumpsuits, and long black hair.
I've never heard that before.
Nope. It is weird.
Yeah.
And 2 of the, I'm just going to call them aliens because it's easier that way. 2 of the aliens stayed with the craft. 1 came forward. Some described it as gray. Some didn't even describe it. Some described it as just someone with dark complexion, right? Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing is that most of the students, when you watch these videos of the students talking about this, they're all of European descent. So I don't know what the story is like if this is a private school.
Okay.
I mean, they're not African.
Sure.
There are some African students at this school, and you can see that if you watch this, but not all of them. So anyway, some describe it as being a, quote, black man. A few, which I found interesting, only said they saw one figure, one alien.
Sure.
So there's all sorts of different accounts. So you that might play into your credibility, the whole thing. But anyway, worth mentioning, some students began to get incredibly scared, just very terrified, and this fear began to spread amongst the students. An 8-year-old said that they were moving around, like the aliens were moving around, and began like mimicking the students, almost like a copycat sort of thing. Like maybe a student would like run from here to here, and then the alien would like just kind of do the same thing. So there was this like
parroting back and forth. Yep.
Exactly. And they came closer, at least the one came closer, and it was within arm's reach of the students, and the students froze. Mm-hmm. They described time as slowing down.
Okay.
And not everyone reported a communication. That's worth mentioning. Not all 100% reported hearing or telepathy or a voice or anything like that, but a fair number did. And the ones that did report a communication, they said that once time started slowing down, they began receiving telepathic communications from the beings, which is wild. But what's more interesting is what the messages were. So they said that they started seeing images, like hundreds, if not thousands of images right in a row, just like at blazing fast speed, just flashing through their minds. And again, this goes back to like kids trying to explain telepathy without like understanding the concept or the word
all
behind
of this
it.
Stuff. Yeah.
And there were 2 types of messages that the children received from these aliens. One was about environmental collapse, and the other one was about technology being used in a way that is harmful for the planet and for humanity.
Sure.
Which is so fascinating.
Yeah.
It is so fascinating. Those that saw or heard, I guess, the environmental piece of it said that something, quote unquote, something bad environmentally was going to happen in their lifetime when they were older, and that they needed to do everything they could to prevent that from happening. And they also came away with a message that there's no reason to have pollution on this planet. Like it is.
That's great.
It's completely unnecessary.
Sure.
And it is bad for the environment. It is bad for the planet. It's bad for the ecosystem. It's bad for the development of the human race. And you, like, stop doing that. Like, why are you doing that? And those that were getting the technological, like, you know, technology is bad. It's the same sort of thing. It's like technology can be good. It is good, but it's being used in the wrong way. And you need to stop doing it that way.
Makes sense.
Does it?
Well, I feel like we've heard this message before, like in other UFO encounters, and maybe it's not one for one, you know, verbatim, but it's very similar, right?
It is. And
it just is, I think. Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to like the you know, at the very outset of the show, like we're talking about the motives, like why are they doing this? And perhaps this one specifically, and we can't necessarily, like, again, we're just speculating and we can't talk about all of them, but maybe this one specifically, it's like, here's a group of kids. They will be future leaders, future adults, future decision makers. Like we can influence them early and maybe they can influence future generations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right.
I guess. Well, as much as anything can when we're talking about this.
Well, and this ties back to the idea of telling kids versus adults, because I think you tell an adult like, hey, don't save the planet. It's like, yeah, okay, we get it.
Yeah, well, I still got my, you know, 401k I need to look after.
I got to drive my car to
7 more years.
Right. Drive kids out to school. But now if you tell kids, they might start thinking at a younger age,
yes,
hey, I need to actually do this and live in a way that's consistent with the environment.
Intergalactic propaganda.
Thank you. Thank you, aliens.
Right. So as this is happening, a few students run back inside. They find the adult that's by that little snack cart thing. And she's like, go away. Stop making up stories. You're wasting my time. Are you going to buy something or not?
Because, that's funny.
And so then they run inside to the teachers' meeting. The teachers, the principal, they don't believe them. They're like, hey, we're trying to figure out, whatever. Like, get out of here. Go back outside. Stop being weird. So 3 minutes, this all apparently happens in the span of about 3 minutes. And they run back. The craft is gone. It's disappeared. Students just slowly start like shuffling back into the building. They're completely dazed, shell-shocked.
Yeah.
Just some of them are crying because, I mean, not only did they see a weird craft, okay, not only did they see it land and things came outside, they were just like mentally bombarded with like environmental collapse. And Whitley Strieber talks about this in his book Communion, during one of his alleged encounters with aliens. They were doing this just bombardment of images, and he said it was terrifying. He's like, I couldn't tell if this was things that were going to happen or things that could happen, but it was terrifying.
Right.
Like just the day after tomorrow kind of, movie, just kind of images. So, these kids, like some of them are just absolutely hysterical. Teachers and principal, like they're like, what's going on? They're trying to get these kids settled because clearly at this point they're like, okay, something happened. I don't know what. Trying to get these kids to quiet down. Someone has the idea. It's like, okay, here, pencil, paper, crayons, just draw, just color, just write, just do something. And all these drawings that some of these kids make, they are just shockingly similar to each other. So you can say mass hallucination, but they are all mass hallucinating the same thing, which...
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, in my mind, that's no longer like they're seeing things that aren't there. They're like, they saw something, and we can debate what they saw, but like they saw something. And so they question these kids one by one, bring them into the room, tell me what happened. Yeah. Researcher nearby finds out. They come in. This is where you can go onto YouTube and find the video footage of this, and there's audio recordings. And I believe there's going to be a movie out. I'm not sure if it is out yet about this specific event.
We should link to some of this stuff on our Twitter and
I'll
accounts.
try. Yeah. I'll try. It's not as easy to find as you might think it would be, but it's accessible. It's out there. But afterwards, I mean, there's signs of just mental trauma in these kids, just night terrors, bedwettings. Some say that this just starts a lifetime of abduction events that happen at night, just, carries with them throughout their adult life. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, what is that? Why is that? How is that? It's like, what is going on?
These are alien visitations. I mean, and I think about it too. It's like, okay, let's pretend that an alien hovers outside of a corporate office building.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the adult, reactions would be any different. They're going to probably, for a lifetime, however old they may be, have trauma and bad dreams, be afraid of things. Like, to me, the way the kids are acting is totally consistent with what I think, or like how I think adults would act.
I'd be terrified.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
know. If you think about your office building, something silvery and metallic hovers outside, it's like, dude, okay.
At first, I'd be like, cool. It's kind of breaking up the monotony here.
Get the recording equipment over here, stat.
Right.
We got to record this.
But yeah, it kind of goes back to some of those original questions. It's like, why kids? Why these messages? Why schools? It's fascinating.
And we're not going to come to an answer, but I will say it's interesting to hear that, like, again, some of the same themes of UFO sightings, of crafts, of beings, of, corroborated events, like these are all consistent or following some very consistent themes that we've heard, which is very cool.
It is fascinating. Cool. So I don't know, man. I don't know if you have much more to add to it, but check out the book if you find this interesting. There's, like I said, over 100. I think we probably didn't even do a dozen. Schoolyard UFO Encounters by Preston Dennett. It is a wild, fascinating read.
And Tim assured me, he said, don't let the cover fool you. The book's actually really good.
Preston, if you're listening to this, no judging on the cover, but what's inside is just absolutely wild. Great research, great read, great fun. Check it out. So that's what I got, man. More questions and answers,
Every week, man. Love it.
It's so weird. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want another one of these episodes, absolutely every single week, you can head on over to our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/crackpotpodcast. Did I get that right?
You got it right. Perfect.
Good. Nice. For as little as $3 a month, you can have one of these. We got some other tiers with some other fun stuff there too. But if you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local elementary school teacher about our podcast. Yep. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.